You're listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. On this episode, we're discussing Failed States, track number 2 on 2012's Failed States album. This is our 7th episode from that record, and there are 2 versions of this song. If you dig up the bonus edition, one is called the Experimental Prototype, and the other is the one that made the record. And right after Epitaph put out a trailer for this album in the summer of 2012, Chris Hanna wrote, "Our goal is always to create a no-holds-barred, forward-thinking, tip of the hat to the giants, Voivod, Rush, No Means No, SNFU, Sacrifice, Razor, Guilt Parade, that have gone before us. We are in their debt and take the mission seriously. Even when we're singing about liking Kurt Russell as Captain Ron, we take the mission seriously. Failed States is our most formidable, and to me personally, our most surprising attempt at conjuring the numinous from the quotidian." Yes, I had to look up those words.
Nice. Well, let's define a failed state here, right? So I'm thinking about the name of this record. What is this concept that is so evocative right off the bat? Failed states.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to Britannica, which reports a failed state is a state that is unable to perform the 2 fundamental functions of the sovereign nation state in the modern world system. It cannot project authority over its territory and peoples, and it cannot protect its national boundaries. The governing capacity of a failed state is attenuated such that it is unable to fulfill the administrative and organizational tasks required to control people and resources, and can provide only minimal public services. Its citizens no longer believe that their government is legitimate, and the state becomes illegitimate in the eyes of the international community. Any thoughts on failed states?
Yeah, check.
Nice. Well, and I also remember, I think about the influence of Chomsky on propaganda over the years. Everybody will remember that he appears in, the quotes in Less Talk, More Rock, in the audio samples. But it also seems reasonable to suggest that Chomsky's 2006 book, Failed States, serves as the inspiration for the title of this record. I don't know that for sure, but it seems fairly reasonable to, suppose that. And I was fortunate enough to see Chomsky speak on his Failed States book tour in Columbia, Missouri, at the Missouri Theater on 9th Street in downtown Columbia, Missouri. And Failed States is a sequel to Hegemony or Survival, which is the first Chomsky book I ever read, because I was like early in college when that book came out, and it was in the Mizzou bookstore. And I was like, Chomsky, that's a name that I've heard before. So I bought it, probably on my student charge card, which then got billed to my mom and dad. But so that's an interesting thing, like buying Chomsky on my mom and dad's credit card. I did not understand any of Chomsky's books when I was trying to read them. I remember sitting in my dorm in my apartment, fumbling with these texts and really having no idea what they were talking about. And I wish that I could sit here and now and say that Noam Chomsky's work was deeply impactful on my life. But I wasn't nearly smart enough to grasp what he talks about, nor really am I smart enough now. I was listening to a couple of his lectures earlier today, and I feel like I grasped about every 6th word or so. And, the description of Chomsky's Failed States book, though, I found that today, and I feel like it warrants a little bit of a discussion here as we consider the utterly nightmarish year that we have just lived through. So, the United States has repeatedly asserted its right to intervene militarily against failed states around the globe. In this much anticipated sequel to his international bestseller, Hegemony or Survival, Noam Chomsky turns the tables, charging the United States with being a failed state, and therefore a danger to its own people and the world. Failed states, Chomsky writes, are those that do not protect their citizens from violence. Sound familiar? And perhaps even destruction. They regard themselves as beyond the reach of domestic or international law, and that suffer from a democratic deficit. having democratic forms, but with limited substance. And, that little passage from Chomsky's Failed States book really jumps out at me as we think about the moves in recent days of the Georgia legislatures to remove access to simple voting, and thinking about like protecting the health of the citizens of a country this past year in the global pandemic, which Dr. Deborah Birx today said that any death beyond 100,000 was preventable. And so this really jumps out at me whenever Chomsky talks about failed states, so and accusing the United States of actually being one itself.
No, for sure. I can see tons of parallels, not even within the last year, Greg, amidst COVID, but over the last 10 years of paying attention to the world, other countries' interpretation and assessment of the United States, and understanding those things a little bit more than, I did when I was in college or before.
Yeah, and so as far as this record goes, I did some digging, and one of my favorite things about doing this show, which has really surprised me, is digging back to interviews that the band has done around record release cycles over the years. And I found a quote from Chris in an interview that he did with Greg Pratt, who was involved in the making of the documentary film A Fat Wreck, and who also has Profile Propaganda and Exclaim. And in the interview, Chris talks about his reflection upon hearing Failed States for the first time after the band had recorded it. And the article is called Failed States a Success. And the quote from the article reads, this is Chris Hanna speaking. When the record was finished, it's the record I've been most surprised by, admits Chris Hanna. I thought I had it sussed out before we went to the studio. Like, I know the songs, I know what the record's going to be like. At that time, I thought it was a little more laid back than Supporting Cast, and that's okay. Then in the studio, I thought this is way more rowdy and heavier than the last one. Then when we finished it, I was still surprised. At this point, surprise is the best reaction for me that I can have. And then the article goes on to say, Hanna isn't so sure that fans will be ecstatic over the new one, though. Not because he doesn't stand behind it, but because the band changes so much on each album that without fail, they lose fans each time. And then Chris goes on to say, all of our albums, every time we put it out, everyone who liked the record before were like, oh, they lost it. Today's Empires is their best. Potemkin sucks. Or Potemkin is the best. This sucks. I can see that happening for sure with this, with people who like Supporting Cast, which was received pretty well for its low visibility. I don't know. Everybody has to talk up their record, but I can't really talk it up without a caveat that I know people are not going to like it. So he's like pumping up the record by saying that he likes it, but that he knows that the fans aren't, which is like just so funny to me.
Yeah, and so many of my favorite bands over, I would say they're the last 2 or 3 records, I've seen that where the emotion or the reflection and the thought that the artists themselves have really strongly contrasts with the popular opinion that they're willing to do something different. They're willing to not just rehash whatever made them popular in the 90s or popular on the last record or maybe made people really latch on to that. So that risk and that willingness to do something else, I think when done right, right, and when done with the intent of not trying to just create something different, but making the music where you are at the time. And I think this is clearly a record that reflects where the band was, just like Potemkin was. And it was a different political and personal era.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I almost feel like Potemkin and Failed States go together really well as far as like their darkness that they have behind them is like kind of like an undercurrent. Like I almost feel like Potemkin and Failed States are like partner records. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go on. What do you think?
Yeah, Greg, who is our guest for this episode?
Well, I'm really excited about this guest. Our guest is Shaun Michael Colón. Shaun runs Open Ended Films, which you can find at openendedfilms.com. He founded Dang Records, and he is most well known to listeners of this show, specifically as the director of A Fat Wreck, the punkumentary documentary film about Fat Records. And before we go into like a little more about Shaun, I'm super pumped that Shaun picked a song of an episode to appear on that isn't on one of their Fat Records releases. Like he made the documentary about Fat Records and he's on one of their Epitaph songs. And that just really cracks me up. But Shaun's a huge Propagandhi fan. He wore Propagandhi shirts in the fundraising videos on like, I think they did like a Kickstarter and an Indiegogo, and Shaun's like in a Propagandhi shirt with like that exploding alien head. You know what I mean? From the Failed States era.
Yeah.
And he did a great job of featuring the story of rock for sustainable capitalism in his film, which, I mean, that footage is really amazing that he managed to get Fat Mike, Chris, Todd to all talk about on camera. It was just really well done. I thought that it served everybody's specific arguments. I thought that it was tasteful. I thought that everybody was kind about it, but really spoke their mind. So I thought Shaun did a great job. But Shaun also secured an interview with John K. Sampson. And so Shaun has done some work, man, and I was totally pumped that he wanted to come on the show and hang out. So if you are listening and you haven't seen Shaun's Fat Records documentary, you should. It's on streaming services. You can find it. And we get into that movie in this conversation. And, I pressed him on some stuff that I was really genuinely curious about making that film. So I'm really excited for everybody to hear that. So thank you so much to Shaun. Also, I am adding some interview outtakes from Shaun's conversation with me to the end of the episode. So you're going to hear my main interview with Shaun here, but I also edited out some pieces. So there are some outtakes to this interview that I am going to put onto the end of this Failed States episode as an extended version. So anybody out there listening, if you want to hear more of me and Shaun at the end of this episode, stick around after the music, at the very end after me and Keith's conversation, and you'll hear more. So with all that said, enjoy my chat with Shaun Michael Colón, director of A Fat Wreck. Well, Shaun, you are probably well known by a pretty sizable chunk of the audience who has seen A Fat Wreck, your film. I've probably watched it like 5 or 6 times at this point. Like I tend to throw it on like Friday nights whenever I'm like, done with eating some pizza and I'm at the end of a long week and I'm like, hey, I want to watch a movie. Let's throw this on. And, it's
God,
about
I can't tell you how happy that makes me.
Oh, I love it. And, it was Propagandhi's label home for 12, 13 years, home to the first 4 Propagandhi records. And, I'm curious about some of your memories of like making this film at this point. Like it's been out now for, it came out in 2016, I think. And I'm curious about like the scale of this project and what stands out to you. Like doing this podcast, like we have a giant spreadsheet where we have every single song loaded into a spreadsheet. We have every guest cataloged. We have it color coded for what stage of development we have the episodes in. And it's this massive beast of organizing to just make a podcast. And you had a different kind of beast with a feature length film. And I'm curious about what were some of the unforeseen logistical challenges you ran into making the film? Like, what was hard about the process, getting all these bands and stories documented, going through the footage? I'm just curious about like this process that you went through for making this and what was hard about it,
I mean, I'll be perfectly honest with you. It's hard even to pinpoint any particular problem.
Yeah.
Because it was solving 10,000 problems. And it was a constant, like, solving a problem as we went along. Like the project was initially conceived as it was my first thing I was going to try to make as a short film. I had made some other smaller things and a couple music videos. I didn't know how to edit really. I had edited one thing.
Mm-hmm.
I had shot on some friends' cameras, but I didn't really know anything about how, technically how cameras worked and how to film. I asked a buddy, I was like, what lens and camera should I rent? And I started shooting stuff. It was really kind of, it was not, I mean, I had hopes that if I was like, I'll do this short and maybe it'll and then maybe that'll get me enough attention that I can then potentially do a feature length, maybe documentary, either about Fat Records or something, and so I am so impressed by your level of planning, but there was no plan. We were building the plane as it was in the air. It was built on passion and ignorance. And maybe not ignorance, naivete is probably a better word. It was built on ignorance to how complicated what I was. It was like, hey, I'm gonna go build a house. I've never built a house before. I have no idea how wood works or plumbing or or legal permits or where do I rent a truck? I was at that stage. I was like, I want to build a house that I want to live in and sell to somebody. I mean, it's the same level of insanity, like what I was attempting to do. But at first I just wanted to build like a shack. Yeah. My intention was just to build a prototype shack so I could then progress. But I think what happened is two things. One, I was extremely like a sponge and just learned a lot very quickly. I had people in my orbit that were extremely smart. Justin Wilson, my friend Johnny Kane, Jonathan Finley, who had edited a lot and they had experience with these things, and I leaned on them for certain aspects when they were kind of the co-editors. I ended up doing a lot of lifting myself later on as I got better at things and kind of had a better understanding. And at one point, I was like, me and one of the guys I was doing this with, he kind of basically quit and was like, you need to make your movie. You need to make your movie. Because I was leaning on people, and then which is it's a humbling experience, but it definitely pushed me to kind of go take that next level and really take command of the movie and make it what it ended up being with the puppets, and it's fun, and it's really an extension of my personality. I would say I'm really ingrained in it. The ADHD is there, the ridiculous side things, like the comedy. Also, I the movie is overall, I think it was received pretty well. A lot of people seem to like it. I love to hear when people can watch it on repeat viewing, because that is really, it's intended. Thought was put in to put layers. Let me ask you this: as you're a Propagandhi fan, I'm curious to see if you caught one of our background references to a big moment in Propagandhi's history.
Oh my goodness! Off the top of my head, I wouldn't be able to refer to it.
So
do you have something we should look for?
Yeah,
give it to us.
Well, there's an interview that happens in front of a hall, one of those what do you call it? VFW halls.
Yeah, sure.
So back in, I think it was, I want to say 98. You have to double check my dates on that, but Propagandhi played in Colorado, and there was at the VFW hall, the police came, there was a riot, they had to be they couldn't play. There was a whole massive thing. I think there were neo-Nazis there that came to beat up Propagandhi, and all this dramatic stuff happened. And in the background of one of the interviews is that VFW hall. So
amazing
layers of stuff, which it took a lot, like you were talking about length. I mean, that's why it took almost 3 or 4 years to make it. Some of it was that early stages, and a lot of it was that the late stage of just, we did I think over 100 interviews. I didn't know what I was doing, so I was doing everything. So I was interviewing anyone I could think of, and if I had access to them. And once I got Mike, access was pretty open. Once Mike was involved in the project, most people were inclined to say yes if we wanted to do an interview.
Well, yeah.
Go ahead.
So go ahead.
Yeah, no,
let's talk about that for a second. So I know that Fat is pleased with the way the documentary came out. I've heard some interviews with Aaron and Mike where they both talk about it. They said in an interview that it's unofficial, it's fan made, and similarly, I've thought about this a lot because I get the impression that you just like had this hunger to make this film, just like I have this hunger to make this podcast, which is in no way associated with propaganda, but is about their music. And taking on a legacy of something like that it's a big responsibility. And I know that you understand that. Like Keith and I didn't ask Propaganda if they cared if we made a podcast about their songs. We just started doing it because we were bored and we wanted something to do. And, I kind of feel like I've been really lucky. The band is cool with this project. And obviously Mike and Aaron appear in your film, so it's all good. But, I'm curious if there were any doubts or reservations or like philosophical approaches that you took to the film in order to make sure that everybody felt as good about it as they possibly could, because telling a story is hard work,
Once again, it's that naivete. Like when I started, I didn't think I was taking on the entire thing. You know what I mean? I did eventually. I mean, when I realized what it could be, and all those things, I definitely took that extremely seriously. I mean, I think the other criticism of the movie is that it's a commercial for Fat Records, which, I mean, I'm a fan of Fat Records, so of course it's a commercial for Fat Records. This is why they're great. I want to tell people why they're great and why they're original in the music industry is they don't fuck over their bands, and that is a rare thing in the music industry. That is the dramatic thing. It's so dramatic that they didn't fuck people over. Like, that is the part that's dramatic. And so of course I wanted to honor that. But I mean, the movie is about Fat Records, but it's really about that thing, that ethos and that ethic, that Fat Records, and through, because of Fat Mike as a figurehead, and also Aaron as the person, like that's taking care of people. And it was about more of that business ethics and that ethos as a greater example of like, look, it works. You can make a lot of money. I mean, and when I say a lot of money, I mean like enough to, sustain a bunch of people.
Yeah.
You can do it in an ethical way and treat people right. And you could do it, on drugs if you want, or sober up. I mean, what, like it's like, judging people by their lifestyle and not their actions is unfortunate, because here are a group of people. And I also thought that was an interesting juxtaposition as I got further into the story making side of it and storytelling side and actually filmmaking part. And because, I knew when we did our first Indiegogo, when it blew up that first 24 hours, we ended up raising a bunch of money really quickly, that there was a thirst for people to like see something about the label. And so I knew I had an opportunity. And at that point, no matter what I made, people were going to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have to worry about if I was going to like draw people in per se. I got the Fat Records people. They're definitely going to watch it. What can I say about Fat Records to someone outside of it to see why, this is just an example of it, how it works. I'm not saying everyone has to be into Fat Records, but look, this is why this is great. Not because they play punk rock music, but because of this ethos and community that created around it. So I wanted to, show that off, not realizing I was going to take on, it took like 11 months for me to get Erin to do her interview. We went out to California once and she bailed one time, or didn't bail, or there was a miscommunication. We were heading out there and it was like, oh, she's not going to be there this weekend. Like, and we'd already set up a trip. So it wasn't easy. And I know she didn't watch the cut until we saw it in a theater at the Doc Fest in San Francisco, where she came and watched it. I think she was afraid to, because I mean, at this point I have self-reflection and I recognize what I was doing was saying, I'm going to take your story. You don't know who I am. You don't know my intentions. You don't know my, all my motivations or even my skill level. You know what I mean? what is he going to do with our story? Now, I've lived this story for so many years. This is my life, and you're going to display it as this thing. So I think it took a little convincing. I still think there's, I think there are members of the Fat Records team that are probably not stoked about the way I went about it. Which basically I went to Mike, and once I got to Mike said, yes, that means it was happening. And I don't think anyone else had really much of a choice. So they just kind of had to go along. I think it's unofficial because I didn't ask them. And also I wear that with a badge of honor. Who wants an official documentary? Like made by the people that are like, there's no objectivity. You know what I mean? It's hard for me to have full objectivity because I like them.
Yeah.
But like if it was sponsored by them, this is the documentary Fat Records is putting out. Like, what's the value in that? This is somebody who appreciates the record label deeply and then explored, as much as I could, the ins and outs of the label. I mean, one of the other criticisms is like, how come there's not so a focus on the bands? It's because it's not about the bands. It's about the label, and the label, and this is said by Mike, Aaron, and several other people, Ryan Green, the bands that defined Fat Records were the first five. Mm-hmm. They defined the sound, the tone, the vibe. Those were the bands that defined Fat Records. They're not the only bands that continued to define Fat Records going forward, but they were the ones, Ryan Green worked on almost all those records. There was this moment, and that's what I was, putting the highlight on, because I couldn't do all 88 bands any kind of justice. And by the way, I think almost every single band on Fat Records gets some sort of screen time. Either we have a pile of records, and we made effort to make sure all the bands got at least something on screen at some point.
Nice.
What I mean? But we couldn't do that. And so like, hey, if you want to we didn't do enough about your favorite band, go make a documentary about them.
That's awesome.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's my philosophy.
I think that's awesome, dude. Well, and you got John, Chris, Todd, and Jord from Propagandy all in the film.
John was hard.
Yeah, and I want to hear about this. Like, I'm curious about your process of getting Propagandy's participation on the film. I'm curious about like first contact. I'm curious about back and forths. I'm curious about hesitation. I'm curious about challenges because they're out of the country as well. Tell me about this process of getting these folks.
I'll give you two. I don't know how much of that I remember.
Yeah.
But I actually don't even know if I remember I think I just emailed Chris at G7 or something and was like, hey, I'm doing this. And by that, Mike was involved, and it was more like, hey, we're doing this. Would you? And I had like a deck that I could send and kind of say, hey, we're doing this. We'd like to talk to you. We caught them in Denver. That's why we have that. There's an interview that happened in Denver, and that's why we were able to get that place I was telling you about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just kind of went there, and they agreed to do an interview before a show or after show. And I think we knew someone who was putting on the show, so we had access to the building, all that kind of stuff. And that was just kind of snag them. There was a second interview that was set up. This is where it gets really funny. So there's a second interview set up. I was actually filming in California, so my other team did it, and it worked out great. That was great. But so we do so that's great. Propaganda's in the thing. They give some criticism. Todd really great, being honest, and homogenization and talking about the punk voter thing and being honest about where they felt, like super great. Two opportunities to give their full opinions.
Mm-hmm.
Problem is they're Canadian. That's not a problem. It's actually a great thing. But I mean, the issue as far as being candid is that they're Canadian and they don't want to be assholes because they're not, So we do our little festival run. We did about, I want to say 55, 60 screenings around the world. And we got distribution. Oh my gosh, it's crazy. We got distribution. We're going to be on stuff. So we got to get the Blu-ray and things. So I got to finalize it. This is the drop dead date. This is it. This is going to be the thing that's going to be encapsulated forever. No more changes. This is it. 2 weeks before, I think I'm going through some email. I kind of sent an email to Chris, like, hey, blah, blah, movie's coming out. He's like, hey, you didn't see my last email, did you? I was like, no. What email? He's like, you might want to check your spam filter or something. It's like, okay. What is this? And in the email, Chris is like, I don't know if we can get behind this movie. We didn't really say what we wanted to say about the punk voter thing. I don't know if we represented ourselves the way, blah, blah. And I'm like, it says this little thing about how we actually felt in the email. And I emailed back. I was like, why didn't you tell me before this? By the way, we gave you 2 interviews, but it's not too late. Send me what you just told me in this email and record it, the audio in your studio, record it and just send it to me. And I'll integrate it into the movie. I want more context. That part of the film felt all off balance because they were kind of being kind of like, Mike is probably shouldn't have done that, blah, blah. And then Mike's like, I'll defend my blood. Anyway, I'm exaggerating, but he's like very defensive. And it's like against like not that big of a, it's like kind of off. And so, with 2 weeks before the Blu-ray is due, we took that audio, we took the puppets, we took Mike's retort, we took the puppet that we had for Chris, and we had them talking to each other. And if you're on the Blu-ray, and if you've seen the movie, you've seen what I'm talking about. But people in the theater did not see that. That got added just before Blu-ray.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's because, I was like, how are we going to do this? Turned out to be the most extensive puppet scene in the movie.
Wow.
And it was done 2 weeks, and because it didn't feel right to have the puppet kind of like criticizing Mike. It fell off balance. We did both, so we kind of replaced Mike as a puppet, so the puppets could almost and it kind of like deadens like a little bit because he said some pretty harsh things, his like vanity piece, but it kind of softens it because it's Mike Puppet kind of saying it. I mean, it's a Chris Puppet saying it to Mike Puppet, which turned out to be great, cool. I mean, but yeah, I'm like. My heart dropped because Propaganda is my favorite band, and to have them go, we don't know if we can get behind this movie. Like, what? That's not fair. That's not fair. I gave you 2 chances. I didn't edit out anything you said. In fact, I put every single criticism you gave me in the movie. Because like they were the only few people that really had a lot of strong criticism of something that was legitimately criticizable. The only other person that has major criticisms for Fat Records is Ben Weasel. And I don't think his gripes are legitimate, 100%. And I actually reached out to him and then like on Twitter, and then that's why the movie starts with his quote, because that's the thing he sent me on Twitter. Like that's what, and it also explains why he's not in the movie too. Because if there's like, what, you didn't get Ben in the movie? He's very vocal critic of Fat Records. Like, well, I did. I tried, and he wanted me to give him money. So, that's not generally how documentaries work for the most part. No one else got paid. So I'm not going to pay Ben Weasel to be in the movie.
Yeah.
It's beautiful because it really, his quote hit this like it's like several layers deep. So when you read that, it's like, it talks about, oh, that's it. Western civilization is bottomed out, which is kind of an allusion to the decline of Western civilization, the documentary.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that the rest of the movie is almost like a retort to that tweet, essentially. Because it's like, oh, why should we praise these guys? I was like, oh, because of all this cool stuff that they did. Here you go. Here's a whole movie to retort what you are saying there. How's your documentary coming along, Ben? Sorry, I don't mean to. I'm not trying to stir up controversy. I just think it's funny because I really was genuinely going to reach out to him and see because I had a few discussions with some friends that were like, he's the only one that really is a big outside vocal critic of Fat Records and Fat Mike, big time. So I didn't want to make a fluff piece. I wanted to be something that had that was as genuine as I could see. I mean,
and rounded
people,
you know what I mean, and well-rounded, not just like you said earlier, like you want it to be a story with a lot of dimension, not just this is so great, this is so great, this is so great. You want it to be a fully rounded story
as much as you can. I mean,
yeah.
like it's really kind of Mike. When I was making the movie, I met up with them at Las Vegas at Punk Rock Bowling. I think after his interview, and as we were working on the movie, it's like you could do it, but it's kind of boring. He's like, it's not much there. I was like, I'll be the judge of that. Which was very, very like I ended up getting an email from him after I sent him one of the final cuts, which they never asked to change anything. They never really asked for any, that's why it's unofficial. They didn't touch it. They let it be, which is a brave thing. Mike gave me access to a lot of the songs, and so the bands, I paid some of the bands some money, but I mean significantly less than what it normally cost a project like this. So I mean, I'm grateful to Mike. I'm grateful to the Propaganda guys. I'm grateful to all the Fat Records. I mean, I have somewhat of a movie career now because of that, and that, a little cultural cachet within our scene a little bit, because I think for the most part, I made the movie that I hoped someone would make if they were making a Fat Records documentary.
Sure.
Essentially that I would want to see, or it's not the movie everybody wanted. I'm sure, because it's it's me. But I felt like that era of punk rock hadn't really been, like, no one had lifted it up yet. It was all like, at the time, it was like all about violence and all this other stuff. And I'm like, that's not the punk rock I know. The punk rock I know is very, at least trying to be inclusive, or more so inclusive than some other or earlier forms of punk rock. And seem to, and I say that knowing farewell that a vast majority of the bands on Fat Records were white males. But I meant inclusive, not of just like cultures and races, but like of all kinds of people, like that were like, it's like, oh, you like Lagwagon? Let's be friends. Like,
yeah.
Like,
I love that. I love that about this.
Oh, you like Propaganda? Oh, dude, if you were in a Propaganda shirt, I know so much about you. You know what I mean? I know so much about you, and from and I mean not your personal history, but about what you value.
Yeah.
What your values are, what your value system is. Also, if you're wearing a Propaganda shirt, you're probably a smart person. I mean, it's not really a band that dumb people are into, like, for the most part.
Well, we're dumb, but we try to recognize our dumbness and use that as a springboard to getting better.
Let me not say dumb. Maybe dumb's not the right word. What's the word? Hold on. People who are not curious. Now, or people who are not deeply curious.
Gotcha.
How about that?
Sure.
People who are not deeply curious, because I think it takes a certain kind of curiosity to fall in love with Propaganda, because that means you had to have looked into the lyrics and dug deeper and then kind of understand for the most part. If you're wearing the shirt, that's what I mean. Like, people aren't wearing a Propaganda shirt, like a Ramones shirt. You know what I mean? It doesn't have that kind of like thing. So if somebody's wearing a Propaganda shirt, I'm fairly confident they're an intellectual person.
I'm curious about working with John K. Sampson. I know that you may have enlisted the help of Randy Frickus with the interviews.
Oh, great, the great Randy.
Yeah, Randy made the Failed Imagineer video. He's been on the podcast. Tell me about working with Randy and John K. Sampson for the film.
Well, with John, he was the most elusive of the group. From what I understood, he doesn't really do a lot of interviews. He didn't have an internet. He didn't really have internet. He had a phone, and I think I had to send him an email I got rebuffed by his management, but I somehow got an email either to someone that knew him. I can't exactly remember, but
you don't have to say exactly either. I don't want to make John's life harder.
Oh no, I don't even mean that. I can't even the process of tracking it down. I just know I got a phone number, and I left him a voicemail, and he called me back, and we kind of worked it out. And I kind of had a chance to explain what I was doing with the movie, and kind of why I thought it was important for him to be included, because of this time period that we're talking about is the time when he was in the band and recorded the studio. And this isn't necessarily about Propaganda as a whole, but it's really about that, that moment and his perspective. And he's such a big part of that Propaganda that everyone knows from that time period. I mean, it's hard to separate the two. And I think that was a compelling enough argument that he was like, you know what, I think I should do this. And Randy was up there. I couldn't make it up to, we had limited funds, even though we made a bunch of, listen, we raised almost $40,000 with Indiegogo. That's great. the movie cost $100,000 to make, so you do the math.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's a lot, like it's just a lot. So so we couldn't afford necessarily do that. But I also did that with a couple of things, with a couple of fat record bands around the world. There's some stuff filmed in Germany from some fans, and also one of the bands that we were really connect with, and out in Japan, the manager for High Standard, great dude, like was filmed that for us. You know what I mean? There was so with Propaganda though, Randy, I reached out. I can't remember why I reached out to Randy. I think I had been doing some research and I saw he was up there. It might have even been on Facebook.
Well, he also plays filmmaker, and he plays hockey with Chris and Beeve too. So he's on Chris and Beeve's hockey team.
At the time, I don't think I knew that.
Okay.
I think I just saw that he was in the same city and that he had done a documentary about a venue.
Okay.
And so
the Royal Albert.
This guy knows how to film. Yeah, and I saw that, and I watched that, and I was like, oh, okay, so I bet this guy, he probably knows who Propaganda is.
Oh, heck yeah.
If he lives in Winnipeg. So if you live in Winnipeg and you're into like punk rock at all, like you have to know who they are. So so I reached out to him, and he also shot some B-roll that shows up in the film for our Canada section stuff. Amazing filmmaker. He's definitely, I'm sure your audience already knows him, and just definitely go support him. He's been doing some really cool stuff. Currently, he's like, I was very jealous he got to do that music video. Like the best kind of jealous. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I
totally.
was glad it was him for sure. So John ended up doing it, which was really very, very cool of him to do that. The movie exists because a lot of cool people did that. I don't want to downplay him doing that, but I just want to point out that a lot of people were really cool. And when you're making a movie, there's just at any point should be shut down. There's just like so many things that have to go right. It's a miracle. I mean, I mean like miracle, like Marvel kind of miracle, not religious kind of miracle. Like it's the fact that it happened is it still kind of boggles my mind, because like I said, I can't even remember. Like it's almost like too blurry to remember. Like it's like, I think when a woman gives birth or something, you know how they have that chemical that makes them forget about it. It's so painful. I'm not comparing to childbirth, but I'm saying that like there's like a part of me that it's, and also the time distance is fading, and it's so hard to make movies because I'm currently working on 2 that I've been working on for the last, like, one for 3 years and another one for 4 years, respectively. And they're just like really hard in the best way. I mean, I don't want to, like, they're really hard because it's like running a long marathon. So you have to keep on it. And I think that's, if I have any skill, that was my skill with the Fat Record Doc, is that we kept working on it, and I kept getting people say, when's it coming out? When it's done, because I didn't want to put it out unless it was good, or at least the best thing I could make. You know what I mean? And John, like all the people that are in it, it's like this little time capsule now that kind of, I hope sticks around. Some of, like, I heard Fat Records fans say they showed it to their kids to kind of show why they were into this thing so much. And I'm just honored to have been the one that got to tell the story, and I hope I didn't fuck it up too bad.
When you're making a film, I mean, obviously you have to cut things down from all the probably hundreds of hours of footage that you accumulate, and I'm curious what kinds of unpublished footage you have from anything Propaganda related that might be sitting in like hard drives.
I mean, you could make 4 full other movies, I think, about with the other things that we have, and I wish I had some golden nuggets for you. Like, there's just, I just don't remember the interviews.
It's totally fine.
I really wish I did. I mean, and maybe one day I might, what your question, and because like, it got me thinking about this, and there's so much archival stuff that I do have, as far as these interviews, and there's a lot of stuff that did not make it into the movie. And so I'm thinking about maybe going through some of those interviews and maybe we can collaborate and make at some level make them available somewhere. So maybe your fans can go check them out or something like that. Um, I'll probably go through them first to make sure there's nothing. I don't think there's anything that
incendiary.
I mean, it's propaganda.
You could make you could make like a monetized YouTube channel where you have like uncut interview segments. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of different ways that you can go about it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I gotta do that. Also, if you want to make a podcast out of it, you could always use all this hours of audio,
man,
or anybody out there.
The
like
Fat
I have
Wreck
stuff.
interview archive. Holy smokes, that's a project right there.
Hey, if there's somebody out there that wants to take on an audio project or even a secondary documentary, I got so much shit. I have
unbelievable
so much shit that's like that I'm never probably going to use for anything. So I mean, this is the first time I've even thought about this at this level. But yeah, if anyone's listening, contact me. And I'm not precious about that stuff. I mean, other than not wanting to put out something that one of the interviewees would not want, but there's nothing that I think that is like that.
Nice.
It's not that kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't want them to know my first Fat Records, album was I don't know. I'm just joking around. But, yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I think I probably will though on the propaganda interviews. It might be cool to kind of grab the audio and video from those and kind of put those somewhere. That's a great idea. I'm gonna put that in the. Hopefully, I'll get something like that going in the next month or two because I think that's pretty. Maybe we could fairly easy thing for me to do.
Maybe we could do an offshoot podcast where Shaun introduces an interview, and we put out some propaganda related material for the podcast. Let me know if you have any ideas on that. Maybe we can talk about that in the future.
Hey, my anything I have access to, you can have and use to do, and I'll help you however you want. I mean, to a degree, of course.
Sure, of course.
like as far as resources are concerned, and and things like that. Like I can't edit an entire documentary for them. Sorry,
dude. Heck no. Well, so let's talk about the song "Failed States." What do you think?
You know what? So on the list, this was the one I chose because of all the songs that were left. It was the one that I think had, because man, you got a lot of good songs that I would have jumped on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, also all propaganda sounds good, but what I remember most about this was when this record was coming out. This was the first song that they released, and it definitely gave me the same level of excitement, I think, as I'm going to mispronounce the German Die Journer. I'm not going to say.
Oh,
it right.
Die Jugendmarschiert.
But yes, thank you.
Yeah,
I know an expert would be able to handle it.
Die Jugendmarschiert.
Yeah, I just remember when that one came out, and it got me so excited because I think that was the first propaganda in a long time. And Failed States came not crazy far after supporting cast, but it definitely was like when I heard that I was like, oh, that's awesome. And he making like the little cultural reference, which reminded me of Back to the Motor League and that kind of thing with and the way he pronounced Lance Bass, I think it's Lance Bass, not Lance Bass, which it's just so funny. But I hadn't really dove into the lyric. I mean, I'd kind of listened to it and I thought it was about one thing. It's like most propaganda songs, like you kind of, as you hear it, you kind of get some kind of visualization because some of the imagery that he's putting forth. But then you read the lyrics and you're like, oh, okay, this is about, to me, about humans are flawed, and we're all like even Chris, kind of like that self-reflective thing we were talking about earlier, like as a guy who doesn't eat meat and is very compassionate, there's still times he wants to like literally kill someone on the street. He gets that tinge, you know what I mean? He gets that tinge where he wants to strangle somebody. He doesn't do it, but he's like so. And the Tom Hanks reference in the Lance Bass, what an interesting rhyme scheme there, which I thought was really interesting. Like you're just gonna change your pronunciation so you can get it in there. That's clever. Cheating, but I love it. Lance Bass, because you're like, Lance Bass, isn't it Lance Bass? I'm pretty sure it's Lance Bass. like and the lyrics are real short on that song.
89 words.
It's real short. I think it's, like I said, I think it's about, we're all failed states. We all have these big, huge blind spots. And that imagery of the rocket ship and, like the shuttle and all that kind of stuff exploding. Like, I don't know. I get a weird vibe from Chris because he seems like pessimistic, but he's like an optimistic pessimist.
Yeah.
Like, I like it's I somehow find hope in some of the things that he writes. But with this one, I really like, which once again, very self-reflective. It's very about like him. It's short. The way it opened, moving away from the lyrics, like the way the song opens is just like, what a fucking banger, man.
Yeah.
And even when they play this one live, like it crushes. Like, I think one of my, it wasn't this song, but definitely when I've seen them live, and this is one of the ones that you're like, oh my god, I can't. And George on the drums, you're like, how the hell, George, why are you so good in your Birkenstocks? Jordy boy, man, I love that guy. Such a sweetheart. But yeah, so that song, like I really kind of, the emotional part of me, it connects it to like a new Propaganda record. It's the first taste you got, and so I guess that's pretty much my thoughts on the song. What do you think, Greg?
Well, I really like the opening line, 29 years in human history, the total duration of time without war. I love that line. Right. So it's this reference to a Chris Hedges book, War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning, which, Chris Hanna's a huge Chris Hedges fan and refers to him in other songs. Hedges tells it like it is in Things I Like off this exact same LP. And so this is an awesome opening line because it essentially says, for the entire existence of our species, one of our major priorities has been killing each other with total abandon. And when you realize that you are a peaceful person who cares about human progress, and within your entire lifespan, you're not going to be able to turn on the news or read a news article pretty much any day on Earth without some type of human rights atrocity occurring. To me, that's like what this song is saying. It's like recognizing that I'm never going to see a peaceful day during my finite existence on planet Earth. And to me, that's what it's talking about. Like, in all of the like thousands of years that humans have existed on this planet, we've only had 29 that are documented as being without a violent conflict on a wide scale.
Right.
And, that's pretty scary, knowing that I'm going to go in one side and out the other on this lifetime, and the news is going to be bad the whole time. You know what I mean? It's a lot to carry with you. So it's like the thought of like blasting into outer space on a rocket ship and just escaping all of this.
Oh yeah, right. With Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
Because he's so loved. Because he's not really like, it's hard to find something wrong with Tom Hanks.
Yeah. It's just one of those.
Lance Bass, though. I guess Lance Bass has the money.
I guess he's rich, but so that's just kind of my general impression off the top of my head. But you're right. It's such
I love it.
It's one of those songs where you see it live too, and it's like, if you've ever been watching a band and it's so good that you just start laughing while you're standing in the crowd, you're like, I can't believe that just happened. I start like I remember seeing No Means No one time, and I spent half the show laughing because it was just so ridiculously good. And it's happened to Propaganda shows. It's happened to Strung Out shows, where I'll just start laughing in the middle of the crowd because it's just so good that I can't believe I'm there watching it. And my instinctual reaction is to just break into laughter. And that's one of these songs for me as well.
You get rock giggles?
Yeah, dude, absolutely.
Getting the rock giggles.
I love it.
So crazy. Look at his face. How can he play like that? And sing?
I can't believe this is happening
right now.
Absolutely.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. Well,
awesome. I love the rock giggles.
Yeah. Well, so Shaun, I'm just curious, like in like a big picture way, as a fan of music yourself, what does Propaganda mean to you? Is like in the big scheme, the big picture of your life as a music fan, as a creative person. Tell me about what this band means to you.
I mean, they exemplify, I think, for me personally, like the epitome of what you can do with a band. Like what you can do with music. You can amaze, give someone the rock giggles, and then also make them a little sad, because humanity makes us a little sad sometimes, because there's a lot of atrocities out there. It's like it's using that platform they had to to say something, and that like everything doesn't have to say something, but it's just that convergence of musicality, thoughtfulness, lyrical gymnastics, like it kind of inspires me to be a better person, inspires me to be a better musician, inspires me to continue to be curious about things that are uncomfortable, if that makes sense. Because it's real easy to be curious about things you're passionate about and that are quote unquote frivolous, but it takes also a little bit of a different kind of curiosity to go and to look at things that are uncomfortable about, like your own privilege and your own culture and your own country sometimes, and your own maybe system of societal systems that you exist in. And it's how is one band able to do that, but also able to, like, it's like they take what they talk about seriously, they take their music seriously, but they don't take themselves seriously, which is, I think, the way that it's an example, I think, what the best kind of people are. And I'm not saying all pop guys are the best people. I'm saying the best kind of people are people who they're still fun, they're aware of the things that are going on, but like, I don't know. It's did that make sense? I hope that
absolutely makes sense. I loved it.
Yay.
Yeah. Well, Shaun, it's been just a pleasure talking to you about your work, the product that you put into the world, A Fat Wreck, the process of making this, some of your reflections of making that film, your process of working with this great band, Propaganda, Randy Frickus, shout out to Randy, and your appreciation for the tune Failed States for the episode. I'm just delighted that you agreed to do this and that you were so enthusiastic about being on the show and hanging out and spending some time with me today. It's been just such a pleasure.
Greg, you're doing I was gonna say God's work. You're doing like a son God's work. No, I'm just kidding. No, no, I'm saying you're just like, thank you for doing this podcast. I think it's something worth exploring. Propaganda is a thing worth exploring. I think it's I love the fact that it exists. I love the fact that you're putting time and effort into it. And you can totally tell, because very professionally done. You handle yourself extremely professionally. Like, it's really cool. I mean, and I'm honored to be on. I was like, oh, great. When you reached out, I was like, oh, woohoo. It's so exciting. It's one of the like, making the movie, there are royalties in some respects, not a lot, but one of the best things about it is, like, cool people like you reach out sometimes to talk about it. So thank you.
All right, so that was my chat with Shaun Colón. Thanks again, Shaun. It was a huge pleasure to have you. Keith, let's dive into some music here. What do you think?
Sure, Greg. First, I have a quote from Metal Injection from a music review of Failed States, and I think it really perfectly sums up, obviously, this album, but specifically the song. And I'm going to read it here. It says, "Really, the only thing punk about this are the lyrics and the vocals. But while past works may not have belonged on a metal site, Failed States certainly does. We've got a progressive, melodic, riff-centric piece of music, transitioning seamlessly between traditional thrash riffs, beautiful open chords, slithering prog metal runs, and a myriad of technical sections that wouldn't sound out of place on a Dream Theater record. And seemingly, in spite of all this frenetic riffage, the album still manages to conjure up some deep and contemplative atmosphere, saturated in melancholy. Never upbeat or bouncy or juvenile, but rather a dark and introspective and deeply emotional journey. An album that, in its own way, reflects the majesty and expansiveness of its cover art.
Oh, so good.
Failed States took me completely by surprise. It's not something I would normally enjoy or that I even expected to enjoy, but this is a metal record through and through, and the thought and passion that went into it is evident from the first note to the last. Quite frankly, one of the most interesting things I've heard all year. Highly recommend.
Wow, that is incredible, Keith. And that little passage right there really explains to me sort of why this is your favorite Propaganda record. Do you know what I mean? Like knowing you and knowing your tastes in music, like and hearing that put together by a well-known metal, journalism and review site, that really captures for me the essence that I feel like speaks to your love of this record as well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's darker. It's definitely the most metallic. It's the heaviest. But as I said before, it took a while for me to really connect with. Like as that quote you read from Chris Hanna, I was like, wait a second, this is not supporting cast, even though I never expected them to repeat whatever they had done before. It took a long time for me to really digest it because it's just so dense.
Yeah. And, I'm thinking about, I've said this before on the show, and I'm sorry for repeating myself a little bit here and there, but I did not get this record until I saw them play it live at the Firebird in St. Louis in September of 2012. I did not get it. Like I had listened to it all day, every day leading up to the show. And I was just like, supporting cast is so much better. And then they came out and they opened with Note to Self. And I was right against the stage, right in front of Todd. And I just got to say, this record is, in my view, the best bass performance of Todd Kowalski in the entire Propaganda catalog. Failed States is the best Todd that there is, in my opinion. But, I love the Failed States music transcription book by Sheet Happens. I've been looking at that a lot this week, and I've mentioned this before as well, but that book has the lyrics included, and it's so easy to follow along if you're a bad musician and are looking to like just bust out some Propaganda. But, if you're, wanting to learn it, definitely get the Failed States book if you're going to buy a first book from Sheet Happens, because it's so easy to follow along. But, this song, Failed States, I was watching them play it today. There's an awesome playthrough video on the band's YouTube of them playing it in their practice space about 8 months before they recorded. And it's like the camera's kind of set like low on the ground. It's kind of looking up at them. Jord is like across the room, but it's really, really clear on Jord as well. But they're so dialed in that performance. And it really is just marvelous watching this band play such incredibly hard music and making it just look so simple. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that video is incredible. If you've not seen it, I definitely recommend giving that a few views. But Greg, I have to say, I think it's kind of hard for me to talk about this song, Failed States, without at least mentioning the preceding track, Note to Self, which is just the slow, dark build. That for me, I think when I first heard that was the biggest stylistic shift that I witnessed as a fan in real time, not going back to explore things that I missed. I mean, that song kicks the album off with this methodical, pulsing, ominous build until the dam finally breaks in one of the best musical climaxes in the band's catalog. And then this song is kind of a counterpunch. It carries the energy from that climax over into track number 2. It throttles it up even harder on Failed States. And I think just an incredible flow and transition. A song that feels like a swirling meditation of melody with the band circling back to musical motifs over 6 minutes, almost 6 minutes of playtime on Note to Self, to a song here that could be its mirror image. It's like scorching from almost start to finish. The music almost never really repeats. It's actually hard for me to listen to Note to Self and not Failed States, and vice versa.
Yeah, well, and it's like in that hero journey archetype where you have the mirror image, right? You have the doppelganger, you have the Luke Skywalker and the Darth Vader, you have the Enkidu and the Gilgamesh. You know what I mean? You have it's like you have the Voldemort and the Harry Potter, whatever. So this is like the Note to Self and then Failed States. But then for me, I look at it the opposite way because Devil's Creek is my favorite song on Failed States. And I'm not going to talk about why yet, obviously, because we haven't done that episode. But Failed States for me is the precursor to my favorite song, Devil's Creek.
Interesting.
So I see this as like the build up even more to my favorite song on this entire LP.
Yeah.
So anyway, man, let's get into some guitar a little bit. So I just have a few things to say. On such a short song, it's, I don't want to overdo it, but my favorite guitar parts of this song are the string bends.
Oh yeah.
At the end, Beeve has this huge string bend in the slow part leading into "Each of Us Have Failed," and Beeve goes leading into that vocal, and it is just so fantastic in headphones to hear Beeve go, and it makes me like lift my arms triumphantly as the string bends lead into commentary about the failure of each individual person, human being on this planet. And it's so poetic how Beeve takes us into "Each of Us Have Failed." And I'm like, yes, oh my God, it's so good. And then we have the string bends with the complementary China cymbals in the outro section, where it's under "We Seek" and "Fantasy," because you have this bow, bow with the China hits underneath it. And it's so awesome because it accents the singing so well, right? I love how the China hits and the string bends are in underneath those vocals. And it really shows the power of revision when in songwriting. You know what I mean? Because if, say, a band has a full musical performance done with no vocals, you're going to miss out on some potential flares, right? Some little things that you can spruce it up with once you know how the vocal lines are going to go. So if you have a full song and then Chris brings in the vocals and figures out the vocal sequencing and the melody and how it's going to go and what words he's going to emphasize. And then Jord picks up on the fact that Chris is emphasizing a few choice lines. "We seek," "fantasy." And then Jord goes on those chinas. And then B goes, "Bow, bow." Those are the things that I love that bands like this do, because they have this process that they go through where there's different iterations of songs, and Chris plays all these iteration like demos on his Patreon, which is one of my favorite things that he does when he busts out old demos.
Yeah.
But like, I can't imagine that all those like string bends and China hits and things like that go underneath that vocal line were always there. And then Chris gets the vocal in, and then like one of the other guys figures out that he's like really laying into a particular line, and they're like, "Oh, I'll show him." And then you throw in those China hits, and then the music and the singing starts to speak to each other, right? And it's hard to get the instruments to speak to the vocals until you know what the vocals are going to be like. So once Chris gets the vocals to settle into the music, you can do little things that maybe didn't always exist. And so I really dig the way that Jord and Beeve and Chris like accent each other with some well-timed musicality that probably came through in the months that this song was coming together.
Oh, I agree, Greg. I think synchronicity is all over this, but
Yeah.
also each person adding their own touch in a way that comes through either with a bass line or with those bends or with the very opening, that monster guitar slide that
Yeah.
segues, from like the previous track into here, you're just pummeled with riff after riff, thrashy and chuggy and palm muted heavy chords. Then they're like these raking discordant chords played by both the Beeve and Chris at the same time. There are catchy leads that transition into what is, I guess, kind of the first verse, though it's not really a verse. And then the transitions and the main riff under the first vocals, like that could be on a thrash record or a power trio prog album. Like it really fits either of those. And it might be one of the heaviest songs I think the band has written, but not just heavy. Like there are all these ideas that, like, just like you mentioned, they're tagged on to the end of the main melody. The Beeve has these ringing open notes. Chris plays these really powerful single notes under the Beeve's palm muting. Both throw in these like unexpected chugging parts. And again, like nothing seems to repeat, but none of it seems overperformed or overwritten. I loved your description in saying like, obviously like they started with more of a bare bones version, and then once they started to play it and build onto it, they could make a better version of it, by piecing their ideas together. The tempo slows a little bit and the pendulum swings back to kind of proggy as Chris drums those power chords while the Beeve picks out like a really unique pattern on the high 3 strings.
Yeah.
And that's when Chris is singing like the backdrop of, and then it swings back into kind of thrashy sounding. It sounds even heavier and chuggier before, but different because there are those amazing bends that you mentioned thrown in between the palm muted open notes. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Did you watch Clem's playthrough video?
Oh, I didn't even think about it.
Oh, dude, Clem I mean, his playthrough videos are so ridiculously good. But the thing that really struck me about Clem's playthrough video on his YouTube channel is how long that pick slide lasts in the intro. It's not just whew, it's whew.
Yeah.
It's so long and they do it forever, and it absolutely cracks me up. Whenever I watched Clem do it, I actually laughed because it doesn't sound long or overdrawn on the record, but when you watch Clem do it in the playthrough video, it's like, wow, that's an insanely long pick slide.
It's like a plane taking off.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. But Clem's playthrough videos are so ridiculously awesome. And I mean, if anybody's wanting to learn how to play these songs, like Clem at Last Note on YouTube is hands down doing some amazing work. First of all, he's doing entire LPs. I mean, it's really amazing what he's doing.
Well, Greg, you already mentioned the bass, and this being your favorite bass work by Todd. What else do you have to say about that?
Well, this is actually, I think, probably my favorite bass song on this album. Like, this is the one for me. First of all, Todd's bass on this song is ridiculous. Looking at the tablature on the Sheet Happens book is really hysterical because if you play the song in headphones really loud and then you follow along on the playthrough book tablature, it will make you laugh. When you see transcribed what Todd's doing was like, it's so funny, man. But I seriously, like, the frenetic runs really create like this manic feeling that supports the thesis of this song quite appropriately, of like wanting to blast off into outer space, like escaping the the insanity of the violence of humankind. I think that these ridiculous bass runs like really speak to that and support the message of what the song is trying to communicate. But the outro of the song ends on drums of George just doing a tom fill, do. But Todd does a little bass run over the tom fills that close out the song at the very, very end, and it really cracks me up. The way that it's just at the very end, and it's so good. But I found an interview that Todd gave in 2012 to Greg Pratt, who I mentioned earlier in the intro. Greg was a co-writer of A Fat Wreck, the documentary that Shaun directed. And of the bass on this record, Todd says, I feel good about it. I like it a lot. I like what's going on. I like what we tried to do recording, keep it more lively and spontaneous, not so worried about the little mistakes and stuff. I don't even think they're really noticeable, so Todd's like totally self-critical here.
Yeah.
But then he says this line, which is so important. There's so much of the bass playing where if I was under a higher pressure situation, I wouldn't have bothered trying to make a bunch of those licks. So that got me thinking back to my conversation with JP Peters, who recorded Failed States and Victory Lap at Privateer in Winnipeg. And JP was very candid about what it was like to work with Todd as a bass player who feels tremendous pressure when in a studio situation. And, I get the impression that maybe working with Bill Stevenson wasn't like the best situation for Todd. So maybe working in Winnipeg is a significantly better situation for him. But I don't think it's a coincidence that my favorite bass performance on a record by Todd was, I don't think it's a coincidence that it was done with JP.
Yeah.
Because JP gave the best description in that interview of how he works with Todd to give Todd the best possible situation for himself to where he doesn't feel overly pressurized and sort of like loses focus, And, I think that the bass on Failed States is superior across the board to supporting cast. Not that the bass on supporting cast is bad at all, because obviously it's not. But I think that the bass on this record is so much more adventurous,
Yeah.
And I think that it has so much more personality. And I think that it just like, it speaks to me a lot more. I think I like the tone on the bass a little more on this record. The licks are so fun and challenging, and Todd really obviously worked extremely hard on it. But I think the biggest band performance from supporting cast to Failed States, I think that it goes to Todd hands down. I think that Todd really made an amazing record on Failed States and really shines. And this is like the song where I feel like he shines like the most.
Yeah, Greg, how I said how you could really tell with this record what the band was listening to at the time. And for that to also come out in the bass, which is not always as upfront or as audible as the rest of the instrumentation, I think really speaks a lot. I mean, Todd's bass work here adds depth and heaviness, while other times, you mentioned those really high runs, it adds a ton of melody, especially at that part where Chris sings from Soyuz all the way to Nowhere in Space.
Yeah.
That is unreal what Todd is doing there.
Absolutely. Well, do you have any other thoughts on on George or anything in this song?
Yeah, just a couple things, Greg. I think the staccato drum fills that couple with like the heavy guitars in the beginning and the discordant chords are really stand out. George eventually settles into, I guess, what feels like a normal beat, but he still has all these really huge splashes and fills that are unpredictable. You mentioned that synchronicity before, how the band aligns with each other, and he's matched with the guitars with that dun dun dun, that part, which is so simple given everything that he's doing on this record and the song. But that's my favorite part of the drums here, is that simple tom fill, that dun dun dun, that simple part. He diverts onto his own path, working so much into this song. As much as he accompanies the rest of the band, he has just as much of his own touch and flair, like you said, that it holds up all throughout the track. Again, none of it really feels overwritten or overdone, despite the fact that he is working, as
Yeah, dude.
you would say, right?
Yeah.
I really wish I understood drums more to be able to describe it better, but I think this is the best drumming that we've talked about in a while. And we've talked about Purina recently, which I
Yeah.
know people absolutely love. So I'm sure there are people at home screaming, what? But this just speaks to me so much more, like the drumming and the style here on this song.
Yeah, and this is, like you said, this is such a well-drummed song as usual, but I'm glad you mentioned your favorite part, because I have a favorite part too.
Cool.
After the initial fast opening of the drums break and Beeve is doing some light, and then Jord has these big pounds on the drums that go doo doo doo. And then after he goes down the toms from high to low, he does a reverse fill where he goes from low to high, where he goes, and then he speeds up. When he gets up to the highest tom, he doubles the speed of the fill before Chris comes in. 29 years of human history. So right before that, Jord works his way in reverse order on the toms. And then when he gets to his highest pitch tom, he really kicks up the pace, leading into the vocals. And dude, when I was watching him do that over and over and over on that playthrough video, I was just like googly eyed. I was like totally in love, swooning. Like, I just loved that reverse tom fill where he kicked up the pace on the highest tom. And I was like, dude, you're fantastic. I just love this. What do you think? We should get into the lyrics here. 85 words. You want to get into this?
Let's do it, Greg.
All right. So we've got the opening line. 29 years in human history, the total duration of time without war. And I have some thoughts on this, and I'm wondering if you want to go first or if you would like for me to go first.
I'll go first, Greg. Yeah, I found something thinking about how much this band has a connection with Chris Hedges. There's a chapter, the first chapter of What Everyone Should Know About War is available on the New York Times. And Hedges writes here, war is defined as an active conflict that has claimed more than 1,000 lives. Of the past 3,400 years, humans have been entirely at peace for 268 of them, or just 8% of recorded history. At least 108 million people were killed in the wars in the 20th century. Estimates for the total number killed in wars throughout all of human history range from 150 million to 1 billion. War has several other effects on population, including decreasing the birth rate by taking men away from their wives. The reduced birth rate during World War II is estimated to have caused a population deficit of more than 20 million people. So I thought about this in just the context of the US, and I read conflicting numbers regarding America's total duration of time without war, which can be difficult to define, especially with like evolving definitions of war. And the fact that for the first 120 years of its existence, the US was pretty much constantly at war with First Nations peoples. But the number I saw the most thrown around or most repeated is about 17 years of peace throughout US history, from 1796 to 1793, and again from 1807 to 1809, with another period of peace from 1828 to 1830. And something else I came across is from Max Roser from Our World in Data. I know a lot of his charts and infographics go viral. He's an economist and a philosopher. And he has this infographic series on the declining rates of death from war. And in the charts, it shows that archaeological studies show that societies in the past were very violent. Often more than 10% of the deaths were the result of one person killing another. And other evidence confirms that violence is very common in non-state societies and drastically higher than in modern state societies. And like the ideas of countries becoming more democratic and education becoming more readily available. There's this like idea that the corresponding decline of war deaths is because of those ideas spreading with, like the number of democratic countries in even just the last 100 years, like doubling or tripling. So I kept thinking about this question then, what explains human history being dominated and defined by war? And a lot of what I'm going to share here, Greg, is from something I read from Scientific American, an article titled War is Not Part of Human Nature by R. Brian Ferguson. So there's like this debate, right? Is it innate or is it a result of how societies or organized? And scholars are divided on this issue. And what the late anthropologist Keith Otterbein would call like hawks and doves, and the arguments for and against this idea of war being innate or it being a reflection of society. Like the hawks would say that war has served as a mechanism of natural selection in which the fittest prevail to acquire mates and resources. And others argue that there's this instinctual tendency to protect one's tribe, and that's morphed over time into, group identity and inclinations toward ethnocentricity and xenophobia and conflict between nations. And that if it is innate, then there should be evidence of war even in small societies throughout history, including prehistory. So there are archaeologists who argue a different number in terms of the percent of deaths caused by essentially homicide or war, not being 10%, a number cited by Our World in Data, but archaeologists Stephen LeBlanc and Catherine Register claim even 25% of deaths due to warfare may be conservative estimates. And then there are the arguments for the doves. They believe that humans are not hardwired to kill outsiders, and the emergence of these mass homicide rates coincide with the increase in hunter-gatherer societies, both in the population of the groups, but also in their complexity. So tracing evidence of war in prehistory is incredibly difficult. I mean, cave paintings can be incomplete or they can be misinterpreted. If there's, an image of a person impaling someone else with a spear, but if like the person that's being impaled is actually supposed to be an animal, or unearthed weapons that might have served purposes other than warfare, like agriculture, or even human remains, can be ambiguous. But what many scholars argue that there is an evidence to suggest that war has existed for all of human history. So there seems to be at least some consensus among archaeologists that war emerged in some areas during the Mesolithic period, which began after the last ice age ended around 9,700 BC, when European hunter-gatherers settled and developed far more complex societies with the emergence of agriculture. But there's just no single simple answer. And the article explains that war appeared in different places for different reasons, but what made war more likely was a shift to sedentary culture, increase in population, concentrations of resources, social complexity and hierarchy, trade, and group identities and boundaries. But there are also these preconditions for peace as well. It could be like cross-group ties of kinship and marriage, cooperation in hunting, agriculture and food sharing, flexibility in social arrangements that allow individuals to move to other groups, norms that value peace and stigmatize killing, and recognizing the means for conflict resolution. So there's very limited evidence for war as this universal, expansive part of early or all human history and culture, and the way of life prior to the emergence of larger, more complex hunter-gatherer societies. But it feels like, right, given our lives, right?
Yeah.
Like it feels like we're prone to war, that there's something innate within us driving us to kill each other.
Man, I'm so glad that you went so far back throughout all of history there. Like that really changed my perspective on the opening line here, right? And because it's so easy to fall into a cynical view, which obviously is warranted considering what the reality of our lives around us,
Right.
that we are just natural killing machines and that the reason why we're all here is to just blow each other up. And I'm really glad that you brought up Chris Hedges and then that like tour throughout all of history. I do have a question. Can you tell me the years, the first batch of years in the 1700s that you mentioned from U.S. history where we didn't have a war period? Because I think that you said some dates that sort of overlapped by maybe mistake.
Yeah. So from 1796 and 1797, 1807 to 1809, and then 1828 to 1830.
Okay, cool. Nice. So, I knew of Chris Hanna's love of the work of Chris Hedges a long time ago. I used to read, propaganda interviews in like the mid 2000s, and he started bringing him up in like the mid 2000s, I think. And I used to work at the circulation desk and interlibrary loans at the University of Saskatchewan Library when I was in grad school there. And the name Chris Hedges, who I knew Chris Hanna liked, but I had never read, came smack into my hands in September of 2009 on my first day working the circulation desk at the library. Somebody returned the book War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning.
Right.
And I found myself holding a book that I had heard Chris Hanna refer to often. And it was in my hand the first day as a library employee. And I opened it up sitting there at the desk. I'll never forget it. And, the opening stories are about being a war journalist in Sarajevo, West Bank, Gaza, Sudan, and Yemen. And it's so powerful that you can feel Hedges's ache through this opening chapter, right? And it really made me wonder about the ability of people who have seen so much war to ever really experience emotional happiness or contentment. You know what I mean? Like I think about somebody like Chris Hedges who has seen terrible things, and I'm like, can that guy ever really be happy again? But there's a passage in that book. I pulled it out today. And so Chris Hedges writes about his years as a war journalist. And on page 3 in that book, he says, I learned early on that war forms its own culture. The rush of battle is a potent and often lethal addiction, for war is a drug, one I ingested for many years. It is peddled by myth makers, historians, war correspondents, filmmakers, novelists, and the state, all of whom endow it with qualities it often does possess: excitement, exoticism, power, chances to rise above our small stations in life, and a bizarre and fantastic universe that has a grotesque and dark beauty. It dominates culture, distorts memory, corrupts language, and infects everything around it, even humor, which becomes preoccupied with the grim perversities of smut and death. Fundamental questions about the meaning or meaninglessness of our place on the planet are laid bare when we watch those around us sink to the lowest depths. War exposes the capacity for evil that lurks not far below the surface within all of us. And this is why, for many, war is so hard to discuss once it's over. And I love that passage because when you hear something about how often human beings have been at war, and then you read this explanation that Hedges just offers, and then you think about the banality of existence sometimes, it makes the willingness to get pumped up and blow people up make more sense. You know what I mean? And I love that you mentioned the years, right? That the of the last 3,421 years of recorded history, only 268 have seen no war, because that's not what the opening line of the song says, is it?
Right.
So the origin of the line in Failed States is derived from page 10 of Hedges' War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning, where he writes, "War makes the world understandable, a black and white tableau of them and us. It suspends, though especially, self-critical thought. All bow before the supreme effort. We are one. Most of us willingly accept war as long as we can fold it into a system of belief that paints the ensuing suffering as necessary for a higher good. For human beings seek not only happiness, but also meaning. And tragically, war is sometimes the most powerful way in human society to achieve meaning. But war is a god, as the ancient Greeks and Romans knew, and its worship demands human sacrifice. We urge young men to war, making the slaughter they are asked to carry out a rite of passage. And this rite has changed little over the centuries, centuries in which there has almost continuously been a war raging somewhere on the planet. The historian Will Durant calculated that there have only been 29 years in all of human history during which a war was not underway somewhere. We call on the warrior to exemplify the qualities necessary to prosecute war: courage, loyalty, and sacrifice. So that's from page 10 of War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning. Now, that number does not correspond to an article from Hedges that you cited earlier.
Right.
So I found out why that is. I looked up Will Durant, an American writer, historian, and philosopher, very well known for The Story of Civilization, which is an 11-volume work of history that he wrote with Ariel Durant, his spouse. The Durants won the Pulitzer Prize in 1968 and the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1977. And I found a passage on the official Durant website that essentially fact checks this song and Hedges' War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning, which I believe is probably why Chris Hedges altered his number in the article that you cited.
Yeah.
So 29 years is not an accurate citation. Will Durant actually said 268. So this is from Durant's website. This is from a Q&A. I've read a bunch of times how Will Durant estimated there have only been 29 years in recorded history when there wasn't a war going on somewhere, but wonder, did he really say it? And if so, in what book and where precisely? Does he say which years these no war years were? And here's the answer on the official Durant website. This appears quite frequently on the internet and is commonly misquoted. The actual quote can be found on page 81 of the book, The Lessons of History from 1968 by Will and Ariel Durant. Actually, what Durant says is, and I quote, "In the last 3,421 years of recorded history, only 268 have seen no war." He does not specify the years of peace. So I don't know why 29 is cited in the original Hedges book, and I don't know why Chris Hedges used that, but I am glad to see that you found an article from Hedges where he cites the other number. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, Greg, and I don't know what the number is, but I think what is definitely clear, exactly, right. What I think is far more important is to understand that war is exponential.
Yeah.
That if it wasn't always here and it has slowly grown, well, it has grown at a rate that is just faster and faster and astronomical.
Yeah.
That to where even if now there are not conflicts between global superpowers, the consequences of that of potential like superpower war with potentially nuclear weapons is far worse than anything like human history had ever experienced up into this point, if that were to happen.
Oh, for sure. I mean, now we're to the point where you can walk into a grocery store with a specific type of weapon and kill far more people than people who are actually at war with neighboring villages could accomplish in past, epochs or whatever, time periods or whatever. So the point is still really stark. You know what I mean? We tend to hate each other. And like we seem to like blowing each other to smithereens, and we make myths about how these actions equal greatness. And countless people go home traumatized, and that trauma is carried forward for generations through countless families, which is something that we discussed at length in the Failed Imagineer episode as well. So we have this next line. What am I acting so surprised for? If I had a dime for every single idiotic time I felt like strangling some goof on the street, I could afford a business class seat on Soyuz 13, straight sandwich between Tom Hanks and Lance. base, already fighting nowhere near space. It's hilarious that he pronounces Lance Bass's name wrong to get it to rhyme with space. So Keith, is your wife sick of hearing about propaganda yet?
Yeah, she points that out every time I play this song in our car. But I got to say, Greg, the human quality of these lyrics here, the acknowledgement that Chris struggles with these daydreams or impulses toward wanton violence. Like, this lyric is equally funny, but also just hauntingly true, because I, your faithful co-host, get these blinding waves of internal rage set off by a rude person at the grocery store, or some jerk at a metal show, or a loud person on public transportation, where I fantasize, like, what if I had the physical and emotional capacities to John Wick that person into oblivion? And like, what's wild is, like, when I see others act in the same way, aggressively and like over responding to others, in meeting macho with macho, I laugh at the absurdity of it. Like, to what end? Like, are you going to fight someone because they bumped into you in the street, or for talking loudly while a band is on stage? And I have trouble vetting my own motions, and I've struggled with that for like a pretty long time. So this lyric has hit me since when I first heard it. Like, I've never been in a fight. I don't want to get into a fight. I recoil at the idea of getting into a fight. Yet how I'm 37, I still daydream like Jonathan Brandis from that movie Sidekicks, where Chuck Norris shows up to help me avenge every single imagined wrong that I've endured. Is it the culture we're raised in, Greg? Was it the household where expressions of violence were celebrated as the ultimate and always righteous and justified trump card, just as long as you won? Is it innate in our species? Is it being male, or what we've come to think of masculinity? I don't know, and I don't pretend to know, but I do know I very much struggle with that, thinking about responding with violence, even if I don't.
You know, what's really funny is I'm thinking about a Hindu friend of mine who we've talked a lot about the ways that other people's actions enslave us. Essentially, like, if you are driving and somebody is driving horribly behind you and they do something rude to you, actions that you have no control over, how the natural tendency is to carry that grievance with you for the rest of the day and have that ruin your day.
Right.
You know what I mean? Which means that if somebody else doing something that you have no control over ruins your day, they have essentially controlled your existence.
Yeah.
You are their puppet. If your emotions are completely at the whim of the guy in the Dodge Ram who almost kills you because they are beholden to no laws of God or man on the highway in Buffalo, New York, total coincidence of location selection, then you're their puppet. You are like your emotions are enslaved to a person that you have never met nor will ever meet. And so I see a lot of that when I see this song about how other people being horrendous ruin our days, and how much that makes me mad about, like, when that happens to me, because it often takes me hours to re-regulate myself after a particularly jarring experience with a person whose actions I have no control over. I just hate that. It's frustrating, you know? Ugh. But like, so I got something else to say about this opening line. The opening line of this song is, you know, it feels like me the last 10 years of wanting to like blast into outer space. You know what I mean? I feel like for the last, like, you know, decade, I've been standing in like my classroom, and I am like, for many years, I struggled tremendously with expecting a school shooting to happen at work. Like, I just was like going to work, like expecting it to happen, like on any day. And I would just be standing in the hall and be like, oh, I wouldn't be surprised if I start hearing gunshots right now. Like those would be the thoughts that would bombard me.
Right.
And, it never happened, but it did in countless other schools. And like, I feel every bit of bad news just adds up so relentlessly that when bad things happen, it's like, oh, of course that happened, which long ago for me replaced, I can't believe that happened in my lexicon. So I've had like a switch from I used to say, I can't believe that happened to, of course that happened. Obviously that happened. People getting shot in grocery stores this week, not shocked at all. People are so desperate to get schools reopened so districts around the country can talk about safety and security precautions at the start of every year while traumatizing children with like lockdown drills, all while doing literally nothing to address the pathological condition of, but my freedom.
Yeah.
In this country that lets anyone become an actually equipped soldier with grudges to deal with, and I just want to blast into outer space with Tom Hanks sometimes. You know what I mean? I'm just like, Sleepless in Seattle, Tom Hanks, you were kind of a jerk in that movie, but let's just let bygones be bygones and blast off into outer space together and never come back. What do you think, Tom Hanks?
Yeah. And on a lighter note, Greg, I was thinking about the tickets to fly to space with Virgin Galactic currently are like something like $250,000, which means Chris would have wanted to strangle someone, just carry the decimal 2,500,000 times to be able to afford a ticket to space. But amidst this dark, heavy track, I love this line. The idea that Chris is only able to afford going into space by
hurting people,
violence, by hurting people, and then he's not even yet into space, and he's ready and willing to fight Tom Hanks and the NSYNC guy. I mean, this is a flash of humor that I think the band was really known for earlier in their career. But to me, I think it's just far more relatable.
Yeah.
And it's successfully snarkier than some of their earlier quips on the record.
Yeah. Oh my God. And for anybody who doesn't know, Soyuz 13 is a 1973 Soviet crewed space flight. The second flight was redesigned, but from Soyuz 12, but it was specifically modified to carry the Orion 2 space observatory. And there was a crew and blah, blah, blah. But that's what Soyuz 13 means, just for anybody out there who doesn't know.
And I want to then talk about the audio sample where it says, Roger, that Challenger, your go for ignition.
Oh my gosh, I don't even have any notes about this at all.
Yeah, so I wasn't quite sure I understood the decision to use originally, the image of the 1986 Space Shuttle Challenger disaster until Chris talked about the original artwork intended for Potemkin City Limits, which is this hyper realistic painting of a space shuttle by Attila Haya, which was commissioned by NASA. So this is totally just my theory or my thoughts here. And if you look it up, it's really a remarkable, it's a remarkable painting. And when I first saw it, I thought, no way that would work on a prog metal album. Not a propaganda album. It just didn't seem to fit. But then thinking about the image and the context of the title, Potemkin City Limits, a Potemkin city being any construction whose purpose is to provide an external facade to a country which is faring poorly. I mean, how perfect this glorious, over-the-top painting of an achievement that is the space shuttle in a nation where today 1 out of every 6 children live in poverty. So the inclusion of the Challenger explosion seems like an extension of that earlier idea, but just with that Cape Winds painting by Attila Haya removed. So to me, the metaphor is pretty powerful. And that image on the CD and in the album inlay, it hits me every time I see it. I mean, knowing that 7 astronauts died while demonstrating, I think, I hope, unnaively, what is most admirable about like the human race, like scientific innovation, curiosity, ingenuity, and design, but their deaths being a mass trauma for Americans watching and listening at home and schools. in many ways it being worse than they even realize. So these are some heavy details, but Dr. Joseph Kerwin investigated the disaster, said that the forces of the Challenger breakup were probably not sufficient to actually cause death or serious injury. And he said that it is possible, but not certain, that loss of consciousness did occur in the seconds following the orbiter breakup. And equipment was recovered from the floor of the ocean a month and a half after the disaster. And it indicated that 3 of the 7 crew members had activated emergency breathing apparatuses, which means almost certainly crew members were conscious when the crew compartment impacted the surface of the ocean.
Whew.
Yeah.
Scary.
And again, there's like this contrast, this representation of a failed state, of something hoping to achieve something, right? With it being incredibly costly and dangerous. And this disaster, I think, reflecting something greater about a nation, but also with what's in us, within individuals as well.
You know, and I'm thinking of something totally random here as well that I want to say before we move on to the next line about the importance of Tom Hanks and Lance Bass. So let's just imagine that both these guys are just thrown in here to represent somebody exceedingly wealthy. Okay. There was a season of that show, American Horror Story, where the world ends. The season is called Apocalypse. And I got sucked into that one night after a couple of White Claws, and I kind of just went down the rabbit hole. And the opening scene in that season is the world ending, and a grotesquely rich father is frantically calling his daughter, telling her about a safe bunker and jet that he has secured for the family in case of the apocalypse. And so, like, I'm thinking about who can do these things, right? Say that a catastrophic failure of society actually does happen, and who is going to make it and who isn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there are, like I feel like there's like security systems in place for some people to make it and some people to not. So to me, that's what Tom Hanks and Lance Bass represent, and I'm just thinking about that as well. But let's go to the next line. So it says, this is the line right here.
Right.
Each of us a failed state in stark relief against the backdrop of the perfect world we seek. Perfect world fantasy. What a line. I found an interview with the wonderful Sheldon Burney, author of Missing Like Teeth, an oral history of Winnipeg underground rock from 1990 to 2001. And Sheldon talked to Chris, and Chris explains the failed state more abstractly than the literal collapse of a nation. In the interview, Chris said there's the state of consciousness and a failed state of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So when he says each of us a failed state, it's like a punch in the face when I think about this reframing of a failed state of consciousness. He has omitted of consciousness in the line. And what it's saying is, to me, if we talk about a failed state of consciousness, we have failed in our ability to imagine a path forward. We obsess about problems today instead of problems that we know are coming 5 to 10 years to 20 to 50 to 100 years from now. Our imagination has failed us, and our consciousness is not allowing us to chart a course forward, because the problems that we face on a single day-to-day basis are so grand that, like, we don't make plans as a civilization for a century from now about where we want to get to, because none of us will be there to see it. So like we really, really struggle as a society with imagining a century from now, because none of us will be there. You know what I mean?
That's a great description, Greg. And I interpreted it differently, not having read that interview. But to go back to Chomsky, he writes in Failed States, among the hardest tasks that anyone can undertake, and one of the most important, is to look honestly in the mirror. If we allow ourselves to do so, we should have little difficulty in finding the characteristics of failed states right at home. So I love this final line because the band clearly sees the idea of failed states in terms of nation states in my interpretation, but it's like they're also willing to literally look in the mirror at themselves too. So 2 records before this, I think the idea of the failed state, the Potemkin city limit, shine the light mostly on society, the Iraq war, punk, sports, government policies on immigration. But now Chris is saying it's not just society and government. Those things haven't just failed to live up what they claim to be, that we ourselves are failed states, that we are individual Potemkin villages as well, flawed, struggling, tormented individuals with an outward appearance and display to hide our hurt and torment. That self-critical lens elevates the song so much, I think, like not just willing to say that about like a country or about a government, but about I see it as an individual, because how many bands are really just willing to be open and vulnerable and uncertain?
And I think about that as well, about myself as a failed state, right? I think about like the level of focus I used to possess in my life on consistently like bettering myself or whatever, like reading and meeting people, going to meditation groups, going to hot yoga class, going running with people who run faster than me, or cycling with people who cycle faster than me. And I think of all the things I no longer do in that regard. And I think that of what has filled those gaps. And oh man, that's some dark. That makes you feel dark, man. When you think about like so many of the positive things that you have done in your life, and like how you realize like, oh, I just spent 90 minutes doom scrolling or reading about the Wall Street stuff on Reddit or whatever, and it's like, I am a walking catastrophe. I am a failed state.
Yeah.
Like
that's how I see that last part.
How true it is for me as well is like beyond measure in so many ways. It's like hard to wrap my brain around. And like if I close my eyes for a second and I picture a version of what I want to be working towards, like what is it? Like I ask myself that sometimes, and I think about how many events in the past still shape our modern society, like in so many ways. Like I think about like the history of my hometown, St. Louis, like about why people live where they live.
Right.
And why we still suck so much. And it's like blockbusting and redlining and the destruction of communities to build interstate systems and racially exclusive loan programs, and like how it creates modern segregation to keep people apart that we see today, which keeps us suspicious of each other or whatever. Like we live in like a built-in apartheid system that lingers in our modern society today, which shades like the ability of us to like see or form a perfect world that Chris is talking about, which ain't coming anytime soon, because we don't know how to heal and repair past hurt. So we don't have the imaginative capacity to envision it 100 years from now and what it can be a century from now, because we're still so mired in all of the endless struggle that we all deal with. You know what I mean? Like it's so overwhelming, like how obvious so many of these problems are to me, and I have no power at all. Ugh. It's really overwhelming. But let's zoom out. Let's zoom back from the individual. So instead of blaming ourselves, let's talk about the global, right? Shall we? I'll take a break from pummeling myself and I'll look elsewhere. I did find something related to failed states as a concept called the Fragile State Index. I don't know if you've ever seen this before.
No.
So every year there is a Fragile State Index report, which ranks countries in the world based on stability and instability. There are 178 countries listed. Number 178 is the most stable, and number 1 is the most fragile. Finland is the least fragile country in the world, and Yemen is the most fragile.
Yeah.
Canada is number 171 of 178. So it's very stable. And it's 20 places ahead of the US in terms of stability. The US is 149. And I can't really fathom yet how the January 6th Capitol storming will impact the score of the 2021 Stability Index. But we shall see. But I would imagine the United States is going to go up a couple places on fragility index. And, coupled with the Capitol, and now that the U.S. is back to our mass shooting norm the past couple of months, I feel like we deserve a descent into ranked instability. I feel like we deserve it. In 2019, 28.9 million Americans had no health insurance. More than 41,000 Americans died of gun violence in 2020. A year in which we were supposed to be quarantining, and 41,000 people died of gun violence. 17 out of every 10,000 Americans were homeless within the month of January 2019, according to HUD. 81,000 Americans died of drug overdoses between May of 2019 and May of 2020. Today's real average wage carries the same weight of more than 40 years ago. You mentioned earlier, 1 in 6 kids, or about 11 million total, live in poverty in this country. And right-wing maniacs rampaged the seat of federal power just a few months ago. If I haven't said that already, I'll say it again. And Chris Hanna gave a really great interview with Q on CBC where he said he doesn't sleep when he thinks about the world his kids will live in after he's gone. And I'm like, yep. And I'm just watching the United States climb this fragility index of failed states. So when I think about how many things in society I despise, I see the line, each of us a failed state. And like so many times we've discussed on this show, makes me wonder what I am able to do to make society a better place. And then I start to make a tally of those things, and it's embarrassingly little what I actually do. I'm raising a kind child. I'm a teacher. I've probably taught 2,500 to 3,000 students in my in-person and online classes from kindergarten through college-age people since 2006 in multiple countries around the world. I eat a vegetarian diet. I don't fly or drive often. I give to a few causes I feel strongly about regarding animal welfare or medical work. I make a podcast on religion aimed at disseminating the work of religious studies scholars and help them bring their voices, work, and research to an audience who cares about bridge building between cultures. I recycle. I volunteer in my kids' school when I'm allowed to do so. But that's what I do. Sometimes I bet a lot of people who care about the world, maybe in part because of this band, has asked us to care for so many years now. But something I bet a lot of people who care about the world think about is the notion of imposter syndrome and knowing we aren't doing enough. You know what I mean? So I'm doing a lot, I think. But like people who care beat ourselves up of I'm not doing enough. And it's that imposter syndrome that we live with. And it's really tough,
I keep thinking of the image of the ship that is blocking the Suez Canal, and where it says, all the various memes of either anxiety and depression, and then or systemic racism, and then there's the small backhoe that is labeled sensitivity training, but the ship itself, right, is everything we face, and we are the backhoe. It feels like, and we can, as we talked in other episodes, Greg, we can try to do no harm and to help the people around us and to be as positive influences. But when there is so much more direct and absolute harm created elsewhere, it feels like we just can't scoop out the sinking boat fast enough.
Well, tell me some YouTube comments that you found. How about that?
Yeah. This might be the heaviest YouTube comment I've ever seen. It says, I really want to know your opinion on this, bro, which is kind of a bait and switch. It says, Hunk might still be alive as a sound, but I don't think it's still here in any real force as a cultural movement. and I'm still trying to dissemble whether our generation is going to be the start of the end of the legacy of American mass political apathy, or what Sheldon Wolin called the inverted totalitarianism. So this deep question on this video, I think, really fits. It works perfectly.
Holy smokes. Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a little better than I found. It took me a couple years to realize how good this album actually is. Long live Propagandy.
And then you mentioned the rehearsal video, Greg.
Yeah.
One said, I wasn't looking at the screen when this came on and assumed it was the album version. Damn.
Yeah, they nail it. It's crazy how good it is. Keith, what does this song teach you? What is your takeaway from this?
I keep thinking, Greg, even if trends show deaths from war moving downward, like trending downward, we've swept our fears of duck and cover. We've ignored near misses, a B-52 dropping its nuclear payload off the coast of North Carolina in the 60s, or the Cuban Missile Crisis, what is seen as the most dangerous moment in human history. I think of the Sword of Damocles, which is this ancient parable about a tyrannical king who lets a man sit on the throne after this person remarks at how easy the king's life must be. So this person then gets to enjoy all the luxuries and food, drink, and entertainment, but then realizes above the throne there's a sword hanging, held up by just a single horsehair. And the moral has shifted over time from originally kind of meaning and representing the stress that leaders feel to looming danger. In 1961, before the Cuban Missile Crisis, John F. Kennedy gave a speech in which he said, every man, woman, and child lives under a nuclear sword of Damocles, hanging by the slenderest of threads, capable of being cut at any moment by accident or miscalculation or by madness.
Jeez.
So, Greg, I think we're all being held under a sword of Damocles while being gaslighted like there isn't actually a sword there.
Ugh.
And I think back to the Challenger disaster. So NASA transcripts show that the last recorded communication by any of the astronauts was just the comment, uh-oh, 73 seconds after launching and just after the shuttle lurched and broke up into flames. And I wonder, what is our uh-oh statement going to be and who's going to hear it?
Well, obviously, it's not going to be a global pandemic because we still have tens of millions of people who don't have health insurance. So if that can't wake us up, man, we are far more screwed than I possibly could have ever considered. But to me, this song begs us to use our imaginations for the betterment of the future. But the problem is we're not great at that because the now will always win over the later. Do you know what I mean?
It takes precedent. Yeah.
Absolutely. We can't see 10 years ahead, but I'm hungry now, or I have a headache now, or I need to get a new roof now. We struggle to create better because of how overwhelming the now is. And for me, it's really essential that every person consider the ways in which they can contribute to the trajectory of our society. But even though it is essential to do so, the overwhelming nature of rent, mortgage, utility, food, insurance, car payments, property maintenance, property taxes, going to work, doing our jobs, raising children, trying to exercise, get sleep, while also trying to create a better society that we won't even live to experience is mind-spinningly difficult to ponder that kind of work. And I understand the idea of wanting to just blast into outer space. But then I also consider how good I've got it, my station in life, my debt to income ratio, my relative physical well-being, my comfortable job where I work at home, my ability to obtain healthy food, which I also am able to cook. And I think of how good I have it compared to so many, regardless of the challenges I face as a person. And it kind of rejuvenates my fight a little bit to continue using my voice to, try to convince people to do a little better. And so maybe I'll be a little bit less of a failed state 2 years from now than I am right now. And maybe 2 years after that, I'll be a little bit less of a failed state after that. So that's kind of what it's got me thinking of. But do you want to go ahead and rate it?
Oh, Greg, I love this song. I love the music. I love it, how it fits with the rest of the album, but also with just the ideas on failed states as a whole. Assuming my interpretations are correct, given how I compared it to Potemkin City Limits, I love the big picture. I love the small picture and the ideas. I'm going to give this a 4.5.
Nice. I'm amazed at how much imagery is evoked in like 85 or 89 or however many words there are. I find it to be a very interesting song. I love the performance. I'm going to give this one when I think about this one against the other songs on Failed States, there's several that I like quite a bit more. So I'm going to give this one a 3.5.
All right.
But it's a banger. But anyway, that is our episode on Failed States from the Failed States LP. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks again to Shaun Colón for coming on and hanging out and talking about A Fat Wreck and this song with me. It was just a pleasure. If you haven't seen Shaun's movie, A Fat Wreck, you can find it on streaming services and by going to their website. If you want to write to us, you can find us at propagandipod@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at the handle propagandipod. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much for listening. Shaun Michael Colón, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
Greg, thanks so much for having me.
Shaun, it's fantastic to have you. Tell me how you got into music in the first place, because you are well known within the music community, a certain subsection of the music community at this point. And I'm just curious how you became a fan of music in general. What's your story like?
I mean, I was, casually into music as a child. I actually had my first job when I went to Catholic school, and I had my parents weren't super wealthy, but it was, most Catholic schools are private schools. But my mom worked at the school, and at one point in 7th grade, I worked at the school. Like my first job was taking out trash after school. Nothing crazy, but bagging up the trash and taking it out. It was. But one time, someone had thrown away an acoustic guitar in the trash, and it had a broken neck. And my dad had wood glue and stuff at the place, so I took it back home and glued it back together, and kind of, made horrible noises on it for probably a while, and until like I was like, oh, you've been diddling on that enough, we'll go pick out a used guitar or something like that. And I started playing guitar, and I had a friend in the neighborhood play drums, so really and from that point on, music has been key to my life, I guess you could say, at some level.
Nice.
Constantly involved in musical things. Like I have a small record label called Dang Records. I've been an audio engineer a certified audio engineer since 2004. We started a little studio called Dang Studios, and we played in bands, punk rock bands. Like most of the people I think who like propaganda feel like they play in bands since high school. So like that's when I think I really was paying attention to music.
Nice.
I mean? And then like Nirvana, and then eventually I think my first concert was a Foo Fighters concert, and then I went out to California, and I didn't know who NoFX was, and I was in rollerblades, and some skater kids made fun of me for not knowing who NoFX was. And to get to propaganda from there, during that time period, somebody gave me a mixtape. Shows you how old I am. It had like Strung Out, propaganda, and a bunch of other like Fat Records bands.
Yeah.
And propaganda, like the drumming, like George's drumming right from the beginning, was like, this isn't like none of the other punk bands. Like, what is going on? Like, how are these guys this good? And like also the strongly written, almost raw political type lyrics, which more so than any of the other kind of bands, kind of got me a lot more interested in politics and what was going on in the Gaza Strip. Like, what's the Gaza Strip? You know what I mean? Like this were, all those kind of things. So it was definitely one of those bands, like right from the jump, I was like really interested in what they were doing musically, but also had like an appreciation for the kind of lyrics they were doing, which were different than like the Nirvana lyric, but the pointed lyrics of Propaganda, of Chris specifically, for the most part, they were still personal, but I don't know, in a different way, and also called themselves out and was so self-reflective, so self-aware. I mean, and like I said, I'm not comparing, contrasting them to Nirvana per se, but just like that's a different thing, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, like talking about like how he's doing all this verbal gymnastics with like with a harness and net. He's like, I'm writing on paper. I can that self-awareness of writing was really like that genuineness like came through right away. That other thing kind of led me to other places, as far as like Nirvana was the entry point, to punk rock, because you read about Nirvana and you read about all the punk bands that they were talking to, and then you get to a band like Propaganda, and that gets you into like Noam Chomsky,
Right.
like you're like it's just kind of a different thing. And it one of the things I think you wanted to talk about was like how is it in Propaganda, how has it impacted my life long term? And it's
Right.
like that awareness, that political awareness. I don't necessarily agree with everything Chris and them have said and all their politics, clearly, but it definitely put my head in that place to start having, at a fairly young age, having discussions about geopolitics and thinking about those things, even though that song wasn't what I thought it was about once I got deeper into the lyrics. But so anyway, I didn't mean to, but that's how I got to music, and that gets me to Propaganda.
Well, it's really interesting too, because like different music can open up different parts of a person's way of seeing the world. So, you had that piece of yourself sort of opened up, that door was opened up because of Propaganda, but you also had other doors opened because of other bands. You know what I mean? So like,
oh yeah, for sure.
Each time you have one of these like, seminal bands that open a door for you, it's special. And, I obviously think that Propaganda is that band for myself, but it's awesome that like how many doors they've personally opened for me. You know what I mean? As far as like a person who is able to self-reflect or able to see out into the world. And they encourage me to continue doing that every year, instead of being like, well, I'm this old now and I'm adult and I've got it figured out. Like every year that goes by, like I see new things and I feel like I have it less figured out than ever. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Oh, the more you know, the less you know. My dad told me that a long time ago. You should constantly feel like you have no idea what's going on, because if you think you know what's going on, you don't.
Yeah.
You absolutely don't, and you're fooling yourself. So I think that awareness, I mean, it allows you to navigate through a lens of being curious. I think the curiosity of Propaganda and exploring, the earlier records are very raw and the lyrics are very kind of outwardly, but the newer stuff, as we got closer to, to kind of tied into Failed States and the lyrical content of that song, like later Propaganda seemed to get so much more self-reflective.
Yeah.
And there were still those songs that are kind of outward looking, but I mean, a lot of some of my favorite of the ones of the more recent records are, ones where he's talking about being young and what it was like, under the, some of the lines. It's kind of like, it's almost like, it's like in like a Marvel Cinematic Universe. There's like a mention of something early on, and then later on you get to like they've like opened up and explore more into it, and it seems like that like. He's talking about being under the flight line of a place in the Carolinas, but later he's talking about being in the creek and like, what it was like, you're getting that just a more like in-depth understanding of, this interesting guy, like Chris, such a sweetheart, humble, gracious, generous human being. I mean, he was very gracious to give us interviews for the movie and essentially kind of like, hey, talk shit a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, not like in an invitation to talk shit, but like, I don't know. It's kind of complicated, right? Because that band, they're intertwined with Fat Records in so many ways, and they've been critical, but at the same time, I don't know. I think that's also kind of reflected back on Mike, how much of a guy he is, that he would have this band that he appreciates so much. They would even talk shit about him. I mean, not in a bad way, legitimate stuff. I mean, I'm just saying, like, from a perspective saying, like, not towing the line, if you will. And then being like, that's why I love having these bands, because they're, and then I'll put out this record. Yes, I'll put out a Propaganda record, even if they're calling me out for doing something. I made a choice. You know, he made a choice to do what he did because he thought it was something he could do. And when you do something, you take a risk, and it's okay to be criticized for that. I think that, you know, one of the reasons I made the Fat Wreck doc, was because Greg, my co-writers, had done a whole piece on Propaganda. It's like a 12-page piece.
Greg Pratt, right?
An exclaim. Yeah. He was a co-writer. He was a co-writer on the film. And I reached out to him because in that extensive piece on Propaganda, Fat Mike is a great dude. That's what I got out of it. I mean, like, here he sent him back and he's paying for all that, and which he's not worried about money, you know, I mean, because he likes the band and he likes what they're doing and wants to prop them up. No pun intended. And then he gives them money to start their own record label, which is kind of, in a sense, direct competition with some of the stuff he could be if you're a business asshole. You know what I mean? Like, clearly it's not. There's enough music anyone can, you know. But the fact that he gave them money after they had criticized him for, you know, and then I mean, you know what I mean? Like that, like what, like it just spoke, because I think Mike had this, definitely has, I mean, he has some things that we should criticize him about, you know, like there are things that, like any human being, but I felt through that reporting that, like, oh my gosh, this guy at his core is a good dude. It's not about money. It's not about any of the things. Like, it's like he's able to be self-reflective and rise above. And that's probably why he likes Propaganda, because of those same things. And the fact that Propaganda was forthcoming and saying, you know, we were in that situation. We were kind of like, not that particular one, but like, we were kind of dicks earlier on, you know what I mean? Like, but that's awesome, because these are friends, you know, like maybe they're not super close, but there's definitely have a lot of respect for each other. That's, to me, exemplifies what the kind of punk rock I grew up with is.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's a bunch of white guys. Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I mean, you're not wrong in a lot of ways too.
Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, that's just the nature of that, you know, that time period and punk rock, and there's a lot of criticism to go around for that. But I don't fault Propaganda for that per se, because I do think they were one of the bands that got me thinking about those things, and got me, and even Fat Wreck. I mean, that kind of paved the way. You know what I mean? They were not. It wasn't. Definitely a boys' club for the most part. Much different now. I mean, the label Fat Records now is like some of their heavier hitters or female-fronted bands, or all-female bands, or, you know, bands that are not a bunch of white dudes. Which is, you know, that's just great, because I think it's generationally speaking. That's, you know, it's hard to be punk rock when you're a privileged group. Like, it's hard to, like, those two things just aren't congruent to me. I mean, but being pro-feminist, you know, gay positive, like all those kind of things in the late 90s on a CD, and like having you know, shirts and things, that those ideals now are mainstream.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. Especially in the United States. Some people call it woke. I wouldn't call, like, it's hard to think of Propaganda as a woke band, even though they were proto woke, or, you know, whatever that, because I almost, like, people use that term as a pejorative, but I'm kind of using it as a, you know, they were kind of aware of all this stuff, and had made me aware of it, and our friend group aware of it, and it definitely, there was a lot of societal, male chauvinist societal things and misogynistic kind of things that kind of float around. And I think Propaganda was the first band to start putting cracks in that for a lot of guys. Especially that question.